How do you define who is and who isn't a superhero? Hi, I'm Jordan the Nerd of Gold, and this is a question that I asked but didn't get a lot of response to, so I'm trying to ask it again, and I'm going to give my own definition today. Now, the reason I thought this is because I was going through a list of independent superheroes, who was the best, and there was a character I came across that I didn't recognize called Eli Shane from a show called Selectera. Now, the thing about Eli is that he looked more like a fantasy sheriff character, which is fine. He's a cool action star from what I can tell, and I'm not arguing against that point. But I don't necessarily think he qualifies as a superhero. And that got me thinking, how do most people define what is a superhero? Like, who counts as like a superhero? Like, do the Jedi count as superheroes? I don't think so, and here's going to be my definition of it. I'm going to put a list on the screen. Now, there are 8 markers that I think qualify as a superhero, but you only have to have 6 out of these 8 in order to qualify as being a superhero to me. So I want to go through these with you one by one, and these are in no particular order, so like, don't stress about the order in which I put them on the screen. That doesn't matter. So the first one is going to be power/skill. So most superheroes have some kind of superpower, or they have multiple powers, or they have a set of skills that are so highly trained and specialized that it's close enough to being a superpower. So that means like Superman has multiple powers, or you have like Cyclops who has basically one power, or you have characters like Batman or Daredevil who have like so skilled at martial arts it might as well be a superpower. And in Daredevil's case, he does have enhanced senses, which I would count as a power. So I would say power/skill is a very common feature, and that's also a common feature across fantasy characters and action stars and sci-fi characters. So that's not necessarily a defining feature of superheroes, so there's other things we have to think about as well. The next one I would say is a secret identity. It is a staple going back to the first character we commonly identify as a superhero, Superman. Superman has his secret identity as Clark Kent. Batman has a secret identity as Bruce Wayne. Spider-Man has a secret identity as Peter Parker. But there are superheroes who don't have secret identities, such as Mr. Fantastic and the MCU version of Tony Stark. Neither one of them have secret identities. The public knows who they are, but they both have, number 3, a heroic identity. They have a superhero suit, a superhero name, a gimmick to their identity in the public when they are using their superpowers. Something that identifies them as going out and trying to do a superhero thing. So we have characters, like I said, Mr. Fantastic and MCU Tony Stark, who have no secret identities, but they do have heroic identities. And I think that's an important thing, because you are becoming a symbol to the public about what you do and what you're about. And that's an important detail to me for what marks you as a superhero. Next one on the list is going to be a special headquarters of some kind. So this is like the Batcave, the Avengers Mansion, something like that, or Avengers Tower, depending on where you've learned about the Avengers from. The Baxter Building for the Fantastic Four, the Xavier Mansion for the X-Men. These are special locations that we typically think of as the home bases of superheroes. This is a very common feature across most superheroes, but not every superhero has one, and that doesn't mean it's disqualifying for them to not have one. But again, it's a very common feature for them to have some kind of base where they store their gear, they go to relax, or it's just where they meet up with other superheroes in order to share information and train, that kind of thing. It's a very common feature for superheroes to have one. Next is going to be a rogues gallery. If you were a good superhero, you have at least 4 supervillains that you can regularly go to as your arch villains to fight and draw drama from your stories from. And you have the Sinister Six for Spider-Man. You have the Superman Revenge Squad, or just Superman's Rogues Gallery, because so many people fight his Rogues Gallery. You have Batman's Gotham Arkham Gang. There are so many rogue galleries, like groups of villains who are identified as being with singular superheroes. Now, not every superhero necessarily has the deepest bench of rogues galleries, or they're often fighting other people's rogues because those other people are simply more popular characters, and thus their villains are more popular by proxy. So it's not a defining feature to have a solely defining feature to have a rogues gallery, but it is a very common feature among superheroes to have a set of villains that we can call their own as they go in and have more and more stories going into the future. And more rogues are added in over time too. So maybe a superhero doesn't start with their own rogues gallery, but they develop one over time. Next on the list is going to be themed gear / weapons. So this is like Batman's batarangs, or Wolverine's claws in this case count in that sense. They are particular to this particular hero, and they have to do with the gimmick, the heroic identity of the hero. So in order to understand this character, you understand what their gimmick is, and then what kind of physical things this person might carry with them in order to continue their mission on. This is a pretty common feature among superheroes to have special items with them that are their specialty. This is, again, not an uncommon feature. Next on the list is going to be for the people. This is talking more about their value system as they act as heroes. So most superheroes act out of a sense of civic duty to their society, whatever that is. And they don't have a divine mandate to protect the people from some heavenly beings. They don't have a government mandate that says you are in charge of doing this specific thing, in the sense that they are not a part of the state. They exist in this moral liminal space where they are technically criminals, but they act for the good of the people and often act for the betterment of society as a whole. So superheroes are often acting on their own as independent agents for the moral collective good. Now, this is a feature that's relatively new in the history of heroes that we have in literature and just as the canon of Western society, because there's often political or divine motivations beyond for heroes to act. So it's important to see that this is a new development for superheroes, that they aren't acting based on some kind of mandate from beyond themselves. They are acting out of their own consciousness for the collective good, and that is what drives them. Maybe their motivations to get to this point are slightly different, and that's what makes them different and unique heroes, but more or less they are acting for the people. The last one is going to be iconic locations. This is a staple in superheroes. So you have Metropolis, you have Gotham, you have New York for a lot of superheroes in Marvel Comics. There are locations that we really associate with these characters, and that these characters are often acting in. This is often the playground in which their stories take place in. Now, you have heroes in other types of stories who have special locations that they frequently fight in, but they're not necessarily as iconic or tied to in the same way that superheroes are tied to their locations. Superheroes like Metropolis for Superman and Gotham for Batman, they are almost characters in their own rights. They've been developed so much, or they are associated so closely with the character because so many of the characters' stories take place there. So it's important to understand that all of these things work in conjunction to build what it means to be a superhero versus an action star or a sci-fi hero or a fantasy character. None of those other types of stars are bad by any means, but they don't necessarily make them superheroes. So in my estimation, if you have at least 6 out of the 8 of these markers, then you get to qualify as a superhero. I know I've spoken a lot and I've probably repeated myself a little bit, but I just want to try to emphasize what the differences are on that front. And so let me know, are there characters you think are superheroes by my definition, and those characters you thought were superheroes but aren't by my definition? I am curious.